I know some of you are squirming in your seats as that was read, but it is in the Bible, and so we're going to look at the whole Bible, not just the parts that make us feel comfortable and warm. We're going to look at some parts that are a little controversial, because Paul's writing some controversial stuff to a very controversial church, this church in Corinth that we've been looking through. Paul is writing a letter to them called 1 Corinthians, and in this letter he's tackling very, very real issues that you can call hot potato issues that make you squirm a little bit in your seat, and I'm quite sure some of you were squirming as that was read, and rightfully so. But Paul's writing to this church to tackle these issues because they're real people just like you and me, and they have real issues just like you and me, and they're adults who make mistakes just like you and me, and Paul's writing to them to show them how the beauty and the power of the gospel can change them from the inside out, transform them from the old way that they used to be and the old habits they used to have into a new radiant creature, a creature bent on understanding the beauty of the gospel, the love and the mercy of it. But see, this church in Corinth, they've got some bad habits, and they're doing some bad stuff, pretty much. And Paul needs to address them. He needs to correct them. And if you've read this, and if you open up your bulletin and you see the topic of the sermon today, you'll know that it's with a great weight that I stand up here this morning to talk to you about this. Because while it's a sticky issue, while it's a squirmy issue, I have to look at you and preach about this morning. So imagine how I feel now. It is going to be a G-rated sermon. Don't worry about that. It's going to be gospel rated. Get it? That's a bad joke. No, it's going to be G-rated, but here, we got to talk about it, because Paul's got to talk about it. And I'll be very honest with you, 4 years that we've been doing this community here, that I've been leading this church, and of the 4 years, I can tell you the absolute number one thing that I talk to people about in counseling is the issue of sexuality. It's not the issue of addictions. I haven't talked to people much about that, or depression, or crisis, or anything like that. The number one thing, on top of the list all the time, that I have to constantly keep talking about is this issue of sexuality. Why? Because not much has changed from now to back then. See, let me give you context real quick. The church in Corinth, or Corinth the city, was a very interesting place. We talked about this the last few weeks. It was a thoroughfare. It was an isthmus. So if you went east to west, you passed through it. If you went north to south in Greece, you passed through it. So lots of people passing through, lots of transient people coming through for jobs, for their careers, to make money. And it was an interesting city too, because it was known, actually there's a verb, to Corinthianize something, and it's a verb that's synonymous with debauchery. So if you were to say to somebody, you're Corinthianizing, it means, your sexuality is a little free, a little loose. Corinth had this reputation. It actually even had a temple to the patron goddess of the city, located on the high place. And the patron goddess of the city was, anybody guess? Aphrodite. And if you know your mythology, you know that Aphrodite was the goddess of love and sexuality. This city was steeped in this. And because the city and the culture was steeped with issues of sexuality, it had begun to seep into the church. And Paul this morning wants to root it out. But he wants to do it in a way that's probably going to change your mind about the issue of sexuality and what it means from a Christian perspective. Because it's radically different. See, there's two threads that are going on here that Paul wants to address. And one of them comes in chapter 7, the other one came in chapter 6. I'm going to reverse them. I'm going to get the one in chapter 7 first, then talk about chapter 6. The basic threads were, on the one hand, there was a group of people who felt that sexuality was a taboo topic, that you just didn't do it. If you wanted to be pure, if you wanted to be holy, the body was corrupt, so you don't engage in sexuality. They're saying even between a husband and a wife, they were thinking that it was impure, it was unholy. And Paul wants to tackle that. He will. He'll tackle what I'm going to call sort of the prudish perspective on sexuality. But on the other hand, there was another group that was approaching it not from the prudish perspective, but from the pagan perspective, saying, we're free to do anything. Our bodies are free. We're saved already. Jesus already saved us, so we're free to do whatever we want with our body. And both of those views greatly undervalue what the Christian perspective on sexuality is. And we got to look at it this morning, because it's an issue, like I said, that even in a small community such as ours, has completely seeped in. And I want to look at what the gospel says about it. Not rules, not religion, not the, I'm not going to beat you over the head with the Bible this morning. I want to show you the gospel, because Paul points to Jesus and says, if you know what he did for you, it'll radically and forever change the way not only you value yourself and your body, but others and their bodies. First, the first strain, the first thing that's going on. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, although this is a common thread in the church's view on sexuality. I'll give you the 3 points. Here's what I'm going to do. First, I want to tell you the goodness of sexuality. Secondly, the boundaries of it. And lastly, the value of it. The goodness, the boundaries, the value. Let me explain the goodness. In chapter 7, if you have your Bibles, you can look back at this. These people wrote to Paul, and they said, it is good for a man to not even touch a woman. It's good for a woman not even touch a man. They even said for a husband and wife, it's good. And now what are they doing? They're doing what a lot of actual churches still do today. They're greatly undervaluing sexuality because they're saying that it's impure. The body is imperfect, it's impure, it's disgusting, it's nasty. Get away from it, flee. And this actually was a pretty growing common ideology at the time among Christians to say, something's wrong with our bodies. They're broken, they're defiled, they're impure. Let's get away from it. Let's not even touch one another. Even a husband to a wife and a wife to a husband. They said, they wrote to Paul, they said, it is good for this. And Paul writes back to them and says, no, you're just missing the entire point altogether. Now take it from a guy, and some of you know me, I'm very squeamish. You know this too. If people start talking to me about like bodily things or things that are, things are wrong with their body, I start going, it kind of grosses me out a little bit. I'll admit, I get very squeamish when it comes to bodily things. And that's exactly what these people were doing, but they were going much further with it. They were over-holyizing sexuality, if that's even a word. They were saying, it's impure, the body's impure, and Paul says, no. If you look back at chapter 6, he says, your body's created by God. Your body will be raised up by God. And he gives the example of Jesus. He says, look, Jesus was raised up in a body. And after he was raised, he ate fish. And he touched people, and he let people touch him. He says, yes, your bodies are broken. We know this, and some of you know that. When you look in the mirror, your body's broken. And there's some parts about your body that you don't really like. There's some parts about your body you'd like to fix and correct. I definitely for me. But Paul says, the body will be raised up. It is redeemable. It is good. You see, he says sexuality is good. It is a Christian concept. It's not something to be shunned or tabooed or not to be talked about at church at all. It's not something to be put under the rug and shh, don't ever talk about it. Good Christians don't talk about that stuff, do they? Paul says, no. In chapter 6, he says, don't you get it? Your bodies are good. And inside of a marriage, that's when you should enjoy this gift that God has given you. The goodness of sexuality is to say that the goodness of the body, God created it for a reason, for a purpose. And while it's broken, it is redeemable. But Paul doesn't just stop there. So that's the goodness, and I told you I wasn't going to spend too long on that part because, frankly, I don't feel that many people wrestle with that much anymore. I know some churches, you've probably been at them, say, we can't talk about that S word. We don't bring up that word. We don't talk about it. Don't do it. It's not pure. But I don't think that that's where the majority of people in their lives stray on one side or the other this morning. See, Paul says, you can't have a prudish view on sexuality, but neither can you have a pagan view on it. If you look back at chapter 6, there was a second problem that these people had, and it was a much bigger problem, and it was a much more systemic problem, and it goes something like this. My body is mine, I can do what I want with it. My body's mine. I control it. I do what I want with it. And they're saying, listen, just as when you're hungry, you'll eat. When you have desires, you fulfill them. And there's nothing wrong with it, these people would say. Paul says, back it up a second. But he gives one of the most interesting reasons for it. He goes through, these people are basically saying, I get to do whatever I want with my body. I'm free. My sexuality is liberated. And Paul says, yeah, but it may be good, you may want to do it, but it may not be beneficial. And he gives one of the most sarcastic, believe it or not, the Bible does have some sarcasm. Paul is being highly sarcastic here. He's jabbing at the Corinthians. If you look back in chapter 6, in verse 16, Paul says, yeah, go ahead. You're liberated. But he says, don't you know that the two will become one flesh? And Paul's getting sneaky. He's getting tricksy. Because he's quoting Genesis. And if you know the part in Genesis when it says the two shall become one flesh, what's it talking about? It's talking about a union between a man and a woman. They'll leave their mother and cleave to one another, and the two will become one flesh. See what Paul's doing here? He's needling them. He's saying, yeah, do it. But you'll be cheating that person out of the rest of you. Let me put it this way. In my counseling with people about this issue, the number one reason that I hear for a liberated sense of sexuality, people saying, you know, it's my boyfriend, my girlfriend, I love them, this makes us closer together. It brings us more intimately together. And they say, well, we do this because it brings us together, it makes us closer. And I look at them dead in the eye and I say, not a chance. It actually drives a wedge further between you than you will ever know. Let me explain it this way. In marriage, you are completely 100% vulnerable to the other person. In a marriage, when you're in a union, that person has all access to you. You're socially vulnerable to them. You can't go somewhere without clearing it with them. You're financially vulnerable to them because you share a bank account, and that makes it difficult to buy surprise presents to them because they'll see when you buy it. But tough luck, you're financially vulnerable to them. You're emotionally vulnerable to them because they see you day in and day out. They see your ups, they see your downs. You can't hide anything from them. See, a marriage is complete 100% vulnerability to one another. Physical, financial, emotional, social. But if you choose to have sex outside of marriage, what you're saying to that person is, I will be physically vulnerable to you, but you have no other access to any other part of my life. You see, people think that when you have sex outside of marriage, it's driving you closer together, and actually, no, it's driving you further away. It's a greatly undervalued sense of sexuality because you're saying, listen, I will be physically vulnerable to me. You can have my body, but you can't have anything else about me. You can't have my schedule. You can't have my money. You can't have my emotions. You can't have my psychology. You can't have anything. All that I keep. You get this much of me, and that's it. See, Paul's saying, go ahead. And he's mocking them to say, what you're doing is it's a shadow of what the one flesh union should be. What you're doing is giving them this much of you, but not all of you. You're being physically vulnerable to them, but not vulnerable in any other way. Don't you see now that that's actually cheating the person? That's robbing them. You think you're getting closer to them? No, you're not. You're pushing them further away. It's the worst thing you can do, is to be physically open to someone and you shut down every other aspect of your life. That's why sex is a thing for marriage, because it's only in marriage when you say, yes, I give you everything. All is open to you. I hold nothing back. Anything short of that, Paul's saying, you're cheating them. He's saying, yeah, go be one flesh. For real? He says, look back at Genesis. That's what being one flesh means, not what you're doing. You're robbing them. You're robbing the person of value and of true intimacy. Now, how do you get to this point? How do you get to the point where you neither have a prudish perspective on sexuality nor a completely pagan one? How do you get to the point where you value your life so much, you value yourself so much, and your body so much that you can't help but value other people as well? You esteem sexuality within the covenant of marriage. How do you get there? You only get there when you realize the value that you have in your life right now. And Paul talks about it in chapter 6, verse 20. This is the summation of his argument, right? He's saying, don't do that. Don't do that stuff. Not because it's breaking the rules, it is. Not because the Bible says don't do it, it does. Not because God's unhappy with it, he is. He says, don't do it. Why? For you were bought with a price. You see what he says? To the extent you know the cost that it took to win you, you will be bowled over with value. You will be falling in love with Jesus as your bridegroom. You'll fall madly in love with him and adore him. You'll know that you've been infinitely valued and it cost him his life. Let me give an illustration. And if you were nodding off at all, now's the chance to come back to me here. Because you need to hear this. I want to invite you all over to my house for dinner. Okay? Now, wait. Before you say yes, many of you come to my house for dinner. It's a small group, and we've had most of you for dinner. If not, I'll get you over there sometime. I like to cook for you. But before you say yes too quickly to my dinner proposal, let me give you the menu. And I thought all morning what I would want to cook for you guys if you came to my house. I'm not a bad cook, right? Some of you guys have eaten my food. So here's my menu. Okay? You ready? Listen. Before you say yes, before you want to come over for dinner, here's my menu for you, okay? I'm going to start you off. It's going to be 4 courses, okay? You got 4 courses if you come to my house for dinner. I'm going to start you off, okay, with a wonderful, warm crab bisque. Ooh, doesn't that sound good? A crab soup. I'll put garlic, a little herbs, maybe some croutons in there for you. It'll be nice and warm, get you started off. The back notes of lemon and the crab. See, I like to cook now. Next, okay, second course. That was pretty good. Okay, that should get you started. Next, I want to bring out, let's say, a nice warm spinach salad. Ooh, bacon vinaigrette. We'll tice in some hard-boiled eggs in there for you. So you get the warmth and you get the saltiness and the crunch of the bacon. Does that sound good? Anybody? You're liking this so far? Okay, we're only 2 courses in. I got 2 more to go. Next, I'll make you a perfectly cooked mushroom Parmesan risotto. You know what a risotto is? It's cooked, it's delish. And I'll make it creamy, but a little al dente for you. And I'll put in some back notes of the Parmesan, and you get the texture of the mushrooms. You see, I'm playing on your lunch cravings now. Everybody's getting mad at me, I can tell. They want to go to lunch, because it's about lunchtime. Okay, now, I'll finish it off. I don't make desserts, so I'll finish off with, I'll bring out a nice, perfectly pan-seared tenderloin steak, medium rare in the middle. Crispy on the outside, beautifully tender on the inside. Now, do you want to come for dinner? Do I get yeses? Come on, anybody, humor me, yeses? I'll do all that food for you. I'll give you all the 4 courses. Now, imagine that you came to my house for dinner, and you saw all this food laid out on the table. All the food I just described to you. You smelled the aromas of it. You saw the heat coming off the plates. Maybe I'll light some candles for you on our table and make nice mood lighting for you. And I'll lay out nice silverware and plates for you. And you see all this laid out. And you look at me and you say, do you have a box of cookies? And you take your box of cookies and you go in the corner and eat it. Now, I would surely look at you and say, are you mad? I mean, cookies are good. I don't eat them, but I hear they're good. Cookies are sweet and they're nice and they're good. What, are you kidding me? Are you going to go in the corner and eat the box of cookies, or are you going to sit down to this 4-course meal? And let me push the illustration further. The reason why I'm going into this silly illustration is because that meal cost me. I had to go buy those ingredients, or I will have to if you come over. And I'll gladly do it because I like you guys. But I have to go buy those ingredients. It costs me my money, but it also costs me my time, because I've got to take time from sermon writing to go grocery shopping. And that's a lot of groceries. And it takes time because it takes energy. It costs me a lot of energy because I have to sit there and cook all that food for you. I'll do it because I like cooking and I like you. But do you not realize the length and the cost of which that meal was? So then why would you be content to eat cookies in the corner when the feast is before you? Paul says, you were bought with a price. Do you not know the cost that it cost Jesus to win you back? To the extent that you see the cost he pays for you, the feast he invites you to. And Paul says, guys, stop eating spiritual cookies. I know you think it tastes good now, but you have no idea what he laid down for you. The meal that he prepared for you by giving his life. Look what it cost him. Know that you were bought with that price. And it'll forever change the way you look, not only at yourself, not only at your own body, but at others, in their bodies. Do you see now? The gospel, unlike the Christian faith, unlike any other faith or worldview you're going to encounter, has the highest view of sexuality because it says, look what he did to win you back in your body. Look at the cost of a man's life, the God Son, the God King, who lays his life for you. He says, I made this feast out. Look, I'm splayed for you. Look what it cost me. Why would you want those little trifles and treats then that will give you no more pleasure? They won't fulfill you the way his love will. They'll never leave you whole the way his love will. You see, brothers and sisters, today, if you really know that Jesus came, Jesus lived, Jesus died, and Jesus rose, and he did it for you. If you know that and it tingles your toes, you will neither have a prudish view of sexuality nor a pagan view. You'll have the most elevated, exalted view of this wonderful gift God has given, because he says, I'm the bridegroom, and I only long for you. As I close, my wife Brienne has an interesting thing at weddings. I don't know if she does it now, but she told me about it before. And what she does is, when the bride's coming down the aisle, she'll look at the bride and how beautiful they are and how, radiant. She'll take some pictures. But she said she really loves to turn and see the groom's face. Because when the bride walks in the room, comes down the aisle, and you look at the groom's face, you'll see pure adoration and love. He's doting on her. He's poring over her. There's nobody else in the room but her. Do you not see that Jesus looks at you that way? He says, I'm the bridegroom, and all I long to do is see your radiant face come down the aisle. He loves you that much. And to prove it, it cost. And it cost him something so dear that you and I can hardly fathom it, but we need to constantly press it back into our hearts. It cost him his life. He puts the chair at the table for the feast. Put down the box of cookies. Go, eat, dine, and enjoy him as your bridegroom. Go now in silent prayer. Talk to God in the quiet of your own heart.